Hi guys, so today we're going to look at our notes from yesterday, the days 15 through 16 notes, the quadratic formula. So hopefully you have these out already. And then what I want you to do is I want you to turn to the page that has number 6 on it. So you were supposed to do 3, 4, and 5 for homework. So I will be checking those tomorrow. So if you haven't done them, make sure that you get those done so that you get full credit tomorrow. So let's go to number 6. So it's on page 8 is what I'm looking at. And we're going to use the quadratic formula. So I'm going to do some problems with you. We're going to do a review, and then you guys will be taking an open notes quiz today. So for number 6, in order to do quadratic formula, you always have to get it equal to 0. So that's going to be the first step. Then we have to identify our a, b, and c. So this is equal to 0. It's in standard form. So a is going to be 3. B is going to be 4, and this isn't to be confused with the b, the variable here. If you want, you can change that to an x squared and x if you want. And then we have c, which is just the number at the end. So now we're going to use our quadratic formula, so I'm going to just go ahead and write this down. So we have negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac. And remember, this is given to you on all exams, including the Regents at the end. And then what we're going to do is everywhere where we see a letter, we're going to replace it with parentheses. So that's going to be our first step. It's going to be negative parentheses plus or minus parentheses squared minus 4 times parentheses all over 2 times our parentheses. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace these parentheses with the number. So this first set of parentheses is for b, so that's going to be a 4. Next one was a b, so that's going to be 4. A is this set, so a is equal to 3, and c is 8. And then a is 3. So now from here, we simplify in 3 parts. So we have this part here first. So negative times 4 is just going to be a negative 4. I'm going to keep this x equals out in front. Keep the plus or minus, keep the square root. Next thing we're going to simplify is underneath the square root. So this is the part that you can put into your calculator, being very careful about entering parentheses. Make sure that you're using a minus sign, not a negative symbol, so that your calculator knows that you're subtracting, not multiplying by a negative. This especially goes for Katie. So make sure that you remember minus sign, not the negative symbol. You don't want to multiply. So when you enter that in your calculator, you should be getting negative 80. And then we simplify the bottom part here. So divide this. When we simplify 2 times 3, we multiply it, we get 6. So from here, normally what we do is we simplify our radical. Now what's going to happen if you put the square root of negative 80 in your calculator, you're going to get an error. So your calculator will give you an error because this means that there's no real answer. It's a different type of number. It's called an imaginary number, which is a different type of number system. So for us, we're going to say that this is no real solution or no real answer. So that means since there's this square root of negative 80 in our answer as part of our answer, this whole entire thing really gives us no real solution. Because if you put negative 4 plus square root of negative 80, hit enter, divide it by 6, it's going to give you an error, no real solution. It might even say no real solution in these calculators. So basically we're going to leave this as no real solution. So that means that this isn't solvable. We're just going to leave it like that. So your answer for this entire problem would be no real solution. And it's because of this square root of negative 80. Okay, so let's look at another one. So we're on number 7. Number 7, again, get it equal to 0. Good. Get it in standard form, in this case, already in standard form. Identify A, which is 2, B, which is 7, C is negative 4. And then we're going to write down the formula since it's not already on this page. So negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to plug in using our parentheses. So we have negative parentheses, plus or minus parentheses. Remember, parentheses wherever you see a letter. Now we're going to replace we're going to put in our parentheses the actual numbers. So the first set of parentheses is B, so we're going to put 7 in. Our next set is B, so 7 goes in. Next set is A, and then C is -4, and then A down here is 2. And now we're going to simplify in 3 parts. So our first part here, negative times 7, is going to be -7. Again, I'm keeping the x equals, I'm keeping the plus or minus, I'm keeping the square root. Now I'm going to do the next set, which is underneath the square root. And remember, you got to keep the parentheses. And Katie, remember, minus, not a negative. We're not multiplying by -4 times 2 times -4. We're subtracting the product of these. So make sure you're using the minus sign. When you do this, you should be getting 81. And then at the bottom here, when you simplify this, you should be getting 4. And I'm going to keep the division symbol. So I have my 3 parts from simplifying. And now what we're going to do is we look at the square root here. We break up the square root if we can. If it's a perfect square, which in this case it is. So this is a perfect square. I don't know if you can read yellow on the board. Perfect square. So that means that it's just going to come out to be 9. Square root of 81 is just 9. So that actually is easier because we don't have to do the perfect square, non-perfect square, and break it up. So really this becomes x equals -7 plus or minus 9 all over 4. And since we no longer have radicals, we don't want to just leave it like this. We're going to actually break it up into our 2 cases. So we're going to have -7 plus 9 over 4. -7 minus 9 over 4. Notice that the 7 stayed negative. It's the plus or minus. It was in front of the 9. So it was plus 9 and then minus 9. So then what we're going to do is we're going to break this up or simplify it. So -7 plus 9 is going to be 2. 2 over 4. 2 over 4 is 1/2. So there's one answer. -7 minus 9 is going to be -16 over 4. -16 divided by 4 is -4. So there's your second answer. So whenever we have a non-perfect square, we always just leave that radical or that square root symbol. But for this one, since it's a perfect square, we might as well simplify it, and then we end up with actually rational answers. So we don't have to leave that radical in there. So the next problem we're going to look at, number 8. So it's already set equal to 0, already in standard form. So identify A. It's going to be the number in front, so it's 1. B, -2. Don't forget the negative. C, -1. Again, we'll write out the formula. And now we're going to replace the formula with our parentheses. And now let's fill the parentheses with our letters here. So we have our first set of parentheses is B. So notice it's going to be a -2 going in there because it's this negative out in front stays out in front. I'm putting -2 in for B. Again, -2 in for B. Next set is A. A is 1. C, -1. Over here, A is going to be 1. And now we simplify. So when we simplify, it's going to be x equals, we're going to have a plus or minus, we're going to keep the square root, and we're going to have the division on the bottom. So then we're going to break up our 3 parts here and simplify. So first part, negative times -2, it's going to be a positive 2. Second part, this is where you're entering carefully in your calculator. So enter that into your calculator. You should get 4 minus 4 times -1, so it's really going to be 4 plus 4, so you end up with 8. On the bottom here, simplify that, we get 2. So now when I look at this is a non-perfect square. So that means I want to break this up. And it's not a negative, so it's not going to yield no solution. It's not going to just simplify to a whole number. I need to break it up. So off to the side, so these are like the ones that we did the other day. So we have square root of 8. And whenever it's even, I always just try dividing by 4. I think it's easier because 4 is the smallest perfect square. So if I divide 8 by 4, I would get 2, and 2 doesn't have a perfect square in it. So it's just going to be 4 and 2. Square root of 4 is 2, so 2 square root of 2. So I'm going to replace this with the 2 times square root of 2. So it's going to be x equals 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 2 all over 2. And remember, in this case, I'm not going to split this up as 2 plus 2 radical 2 all over 2 and then 2 minus 2 radical 2 all over 2, just because I'm going to always be left with that radical 2, so I might as well just keep it in this form. But I can simplify as long as I can simplify in the V shape here. So if you look, I can simplify, and when I simplify, I end up with x equals 2 divided by 2 is 1, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1 radical 2. And then you don't really need that 1 in front, so it's just going to be x equals 1 plus or minus square root of 2. So again, I didn't break it up into the two cases because you can't actually combine those. We're just going to leave them like that. So notice the difference between the three cases here, the three examples we just did. This was a non-perfect square. Our answer had a radical in it, had a square root, so it was an irrational answer. Where this problem had a perfect square underneath that root, which means we got rational answers. We got nice numbers in the end. And then if we had a negative underneath the square root, that means we had no solution. So whenever you have a negative, this tells us no solution. Or no real solution, I should say. So those are our three different cases. So just when you get to that stage, you can kind of tell what your answers are going to look like. All right, so I think we have one more to do that looks a little bit different, so let's go to that one. So number 9 is our last one. And first thing you want to do is you want to get this equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So I get m squared, and this time I can actually combine these because these are just numbers. So negative 4 minus 3 gives us minus 7 equals 0. So those cancel. So what's missing here is our middle term. So this is really m squared plus 0 times m minus 7 equals 0. We're missing this term here. So if we're missing it, it really means there's a 0 there, because 0 times m means 0, so it basically just cancels out. So your coefficient would be 0 there. So when we go to identify a, it's going to be 1, b is going to be 0 since we're missing the middle term, and c is going to be negative 7. So now when we go to set this up, write out our formula first. And then use our parentheses. And now we replace. So the first set of parentheses is b, so it's going to be 0. Second set, 0. This set here is going to be 1 because that's a. C is negative 7. And then down here is going to be 1. So now when we go to simplify, I'm going to first just rewrite x equals, we're going to get some number plus or minus square root, and we're going to be dividing. So these are all the things we're keeping. Now we're going to simplify. So negative times 0 is just going to be 0. Simplify all of this. So you're going to end up with 0 plus 28, because negative 4 times negative 7 is going to be positive 28, so it's going to just be 28. And then at the bottom here, simplify that, you get 2. So now, if you look, I just have a 0 in front. So 0 plus or minus square root of 28 is just going to be plus or minus square root of 28 over 2. And then square root of 28 is not a perfect square, but off to the side here, we can look to break it up. So it's even, so try dividing it by 4. If I divide by 4, I get 7. 7 doesn't have any perfect squares in it as factors, so it's just going to be square root of 4 times square root of 7, reduces to 2 square root of 7. So then over here, I'm just going to replace plus or minus 2 square root of 7 all over 2. And since this doesn't have that term in front, it's just a 0 in front of plus or minus, I can just cancel 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the answer here is going to end up being just x equals plus or minus the square root of 7. So in that case, our number in front canceled and the denominator canceled, so we're just left with positive square root of 7, negative square root of 7 as our two answers.